Okay, I think we are live here with the very first episode of Gap Closer, or as I'd like to call it, the NA sobriety program. All you have to do is you take one drink every time NA actually makes you proud, and that really helps you wean off your habit. And even if one team sneaks by into the quarterfinals, then maybe you have one drink. But then next week you have no drinks because, I don't know, guys. We've never gotten a team past there, so. But, okay. Anyway, welcome to the first episode of Gap Closer. We ran a test episode for those of you who were there for that. Thank you very much for participating in that. But this is the first official episode. This is a League of Legends talk show hosted by me. My name is Nick Geracie. My Twitter handle will be with the rest in the chat. I've been covering the NALCS for Caliber over the past summer and doing some feature writing on the side as well. And I'd like to introduce my guests here. I have to my left, I have Ezequiel Pinedo, known as Indy. Ezequiel has a wealth of background knowledge about the Super Smash Brothers scene. He's practically a pro, right? Top 10 Colorado as far as Marths go, right?
Yeah, well, top 10 in general. But,
top 10 in general, excuse me.
Best Marth in Colorado.
Best Marth in Colorado, okay. All right. Also is a frequent co-host on the FGC podcast for Melee, Bad Melee. And also has an impressive wealth of League of Legends knowledge in addition to all of that. So thank you for coming on the show, Ezequiel. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Excited to discuss Cloud9 winning the entirety of Worlds with Mike. Wonderful commentary panel. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Looking forward to that. So, Indy, and then right below him, we have a man of many names, Matt, the Magic Meat Man. But today he goes by GF1 Captain. That's the most recent moniker. How are you doing, Matt? Happy about Cloud9?
Yeah, I am. Once again, the only ones. I would have liked the other teams to make it.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I actually thought that Cloud9 had the had the least likely chance, but we'll get more into that later. I don't want to cut off our of course last but not least guest, Brian Chatfield, who, as well as Matt, are both moderators. Brian Chatfield is the head mod of the League of Legends NA Facebook group, which many of you watching may be a part of, always facilitating conversation in there and mostly telling you guys when you're being completely delusional about your solo queue rank. So,
exactly.
Now that I've introduced you properly, okay, does that suffice? Brian, how are you doing?
Yes, that's pretty much all I do. Technically, I'm an admin, though.
Technically, he's an admin. I apologize. Let's make sure in the records we have to edit that, you guys. Okay. So in this show, we're going to be focusing on primarily what just happened in this group stage at the League of Legends World Championships, and then we'll also be looking ahead to the quarterfinals matchups and seeing what everybody thinks of those. So unless you guys have anywhere specific you want to start, I'd say we can just get right into it with Group A from last night.
Mm-hmm. Group A last night?
Yeah, so I thought this group was ended up being really, really exciting. As you guys know, I'm a complete and total Fizz one trick whenever I have the time to play this game, and there were 3 Fizzes last night at Worlds, and it was so interesting to see these different teams use them in different ways. With Faker kind of playing this really high pressure distraction role when usually it's like Huni or Bang getting the kills in the Fizz comps, and that was really exciting to see Westor pull it out and then beat Faker again. What was your guys'? Did this group turn out the way that you guys thought? Because I know that most of the people had EDG. As not us, but most people had EDG getting out, and we all kind of were like, actually, I think Cloud9 could take it to them. So I guess we should all pat ourselves in the back for that.
we got one.
Yeah, we definitely got one. But just the way this shakedown, how are we feeling about Cloud9? Do you think this was deserved? Frost Garen said on the desk that, yes, Cloud9 deserved it because they were more consistent over the 2 weeks, but I do think that EDG was the better team today, and I don't think the better team advanced to the quarterfinals.
Slightly deserved.
Slightly deserved.
I mean, there's a big joke about NA Week 2. I mean, they put up the stat. I don't know what it ended up being in it, but it was like the abysmal win rate of NA in Week 2. And NA always does pretty well in Week 1, but Week 2 is not more valuable than Week 1. They are the same value. And so you could say a team that underperforms Week 2 doesn't deserve to go to quarterfinals. But a team that underperforms as hard as EDG does in Week 1 also, I would argue, doesn't really deserve to go to quarterfinals.
But as far as the... Well, Brian, what do you think, though? As far as the, Because I agree with you, Matt. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, well, they played overall better, so they deserve to go. But I think it is interesting to say, like, do we think that, like, as of yesterday, EDG is the stronger League of Legends team? Like, are they a better team right now?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because AHQ beat SKT, and then Cloud9 beat AHQ. So obviously they're better than SKT by default. But it was pretty close though between Cloud9 and EDG on who deserves to go. You know, it's kind of hard to determine what deserves is, but I think both teams had the potential to get out of groups, and it was up to EDG in the end to decide which one of them was going to make it out, and EDG lost. So that I think that kind of decides it in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the ball was in their court. They had that last game, they had the lead, and again, they weren't able to close it out against SKT, but AHQ was able to close out a game against SKT. I want to talk about them because I feel like they came into this... Taiwan in general has been considered weaker than in previous years. I think that showed overall. But I'm also really impressed by... I mean, people were saying AHQ was worse than Hong Kong Attitude, the third seed who got clapped by Fnatic in the play-in best of fives. They're saying they're weaker than that team. They're saying Westdoor's losing lane by like 30 CS every single map they're playing. What did this team change, do you guys think, to be able to pull off these kind of upsets? They beat EDG, they beat SKT, and they didn't give Cloud9 too tough of a run, but overall I think they performed a lot better than anybody expected them to. What do you guys think they did well, and what did they change?
The meta's in their favor. They've always been a late game team. I think they added some proactivity to their lineup when they picked the Fizz against SKT. And I think that's an area SKT has actually looked pretty weak in, is being proactive. So I liked that. And SKT's answer to the Fizz is Kassadin, which I like to call an answer to Fizz, not a counter.
Right.
Yeah. Because Kassadin really doesn't counter anything. Like, he's not going to smash lane against anything. But it's an answer to Fizz. Like, he shouldn't lose the lane super hard. He should be allowed to scale. And that's kind of the path SKT has taken with their drafts, is they've been looking for answers.
I think it was interesting, especially because if you guys were around back in 2015 at the very first MSI, Westdoor blind picked Fizz and Faker answered with Kassadin, and Westdoor like solo killed him in that game famously before level 6. And it was so weird to see like the exact same situation happen like 2.5 years later, completely different meta. That was like, I didn't think AHQ was getting out of groups, but I'm glad they gave us some fun, and like obviously like Westdoor's one of my favorite players of all time. It was really good to see him kind of turn it back up, a notch for a game there or two there.
Speaking of Westdoor, did you hear the news that he is a dad?
Are you serious?
Yes, Shox brought it up in the interview. She said, "Congratulate." I don't know exactly. I can look it up, but
I had no idea. Well, congratulations, Westdoor.
Westdad. Westdad, indeed. He is 23.
Wow. Well, he does have hopefully a lot of money from. I mean, HQ's qualified for Worlds like 5 years in a row now. So, well, as far as Group A goes, guys, so we have. How do we feel about SKT? Did we think that SKT was going to even lose a game in this group? What do you think they look like right now? Are they the strongest team in the tournament as of this day here?
They did not look like the strongest team in the tournament.
Nope, I don't think so either.
I agree completely. I think... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Zeke. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that the shakiest part of SKT's game plan has been the early game and just kind of taking what they have and working with it as far as like early lane dominance goes. And I think that the game against AHQ showed that if they were put behind by a team who was able to take advantage by it, sometimes the answer's not there and you can't rely on your impeccable team fighting to bring you back in the game like you did against EDG. I think that if you give any other Chinese team that was in the groups the 8-0 lead that EDG had against SKT, they closed out that game within 20 to 25 minutes, and I don't think that's going to fly in the stages where you have to play against RNG, most likely in the semifinals. So I don't know. Hopefully they pick it back up by the time that the knockout stage begins. But they definitely looked a lot shakier in the early game than I'm used to seeing them.
Yeah, I would like to see SKT to the form that we know that they can compete at, because I think that's just the most exciting level of competition that we could see at Worlds would be SKT at top form, but they were definitely not at top form in groups.
What are they doing right now that isn't, like, is there anything specific? Or are they just not being proactive enough in the early game? Because I know
I don't know if they've gotten first turret yet. Like, it's possible that most of their games they did not. I can't say 100% that they didn't. I didn't check that specifically, but they're not making moves in their early game to like take over and snowball games. They're looking to gain small micro advantages and just build those up over time, and other teams are doing like the early lane swaps and stuff like that.
I want to say about that, it is a late game meta. Right. People are being critical of teams that aren't being proactive early. And one of the reasons for that is even in a late game meta, early game still happens. Like, you don't just skip right to the part of the game where Kog'Maw has Rageblade and Bork and Runages. You don't get to do that. That's not how this game works. You have to have a plan to get to that part of the game. And I think more than a meta, this is a craft for competitive League of Legends. When you draft, you gotta get yourself at least one pushing lane. Somewhere where you can force plays, make something happen.
So many teams just didn't do that this week. Actually, like when you say it like that, and I'm like, I feel like I watched like half the games where like people just picked like Twitch Rise Cho'Gath and like didn't do anything in the early game. But no, I completely agree with you. Are we concerned at all about, compared to their usual standards, Bang & Wolf's laning phase? I saw them go from anything from like just struggling to even stay even 2v2 to, I mean, last night we saw them literally lose their first tower 2v2 like pre-10 minutes.
I think some of that is the champions they're picking. They're picking a lot of Twitch. Twitch laning phase abysmal.
I mean, other teams are picking what they're picking and like not doing as bad. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying
like last night they lost turret at like what 6 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous for that to happen ever.
That shouldn't happen to a Worlds team, let alone SKT. Like, that is really early.
Yeah, I know that, like, I'm not saying like that Bang & Wolf should be winning lane on Twitch, even though they have before. I'm saying like losing your tower 2v2 at 6 minutes happens to me in gold, so I don't really like it wasn't like they died either. Like, I think like maybe they like lost one, like I think maybe Wolf died once, but it was very strange. Speaking of taking towers, little meta tangent here. We saw a lot more Caitlyn pop up in week 2. I'm not saying it like ran rampant through the meta, but I want to talk about that. What do you guys think about this Caitlyn development mid-Worlds as far as the meta goes?
I think a lot of people definitely hopped off the Caitlyn hype train when they cut her attack speed per level literally in half.
Right.
To give an idea of how severe that nerf was, this is a late game meta. At level 18, Caitlyn lost 34% attack speed.
But Ardent Sensor.
That's true. Ardent Sensor can make up that difference plus 1% at level 18. So...
So why are people
Mystic? That was Mystic said that was his logic from WE is like he said he feels like it makes up the difference.
So that's all it is, just Ardent Sensor being OP.
I don't think that's it, because how attack speed works is every champion is assigned a base like decimal value for their attack speed, and then the percentage values that you get from like Berserker Greaves, Ezequiel, though they give you percentages of that decimal value. For most 80 carries, that value is like around 0.625. For Caitlyn, on this patch, it's 0.543, significantly lower. Okay. So attack speed on Caitlyn doesn't actually give you as much attack speed. Ardent Sensor affects other 80 carries more than it does Caitlyn.
But is it affecting her enough to the point where she's worth playing because of her like it's like, okay, she's not a good late game carry unless you have Ardent Sensor, and even though if she's not as effective as a COD bot at that state in the game, you do get like this early tower push, like winning a lot more laning phases than a lot of the popular picks right now. Is that the trade-off right now? And that's why guys like you said Mystic was playing it. I think Prey played it as well.
Definitely. I think Sneaky as well. Continue this year's undefeated streak as Caitlyn. Nice. But yeah, I think that's definitely it. And I think,
I think Tristana has to be banned in order for Caitlyn to be picked.
I agree with that. But the way that there's always a trade-off between early game and late game. And I never... You can always argue about which one you think is better. In this meta, late game seems better, but that doesn't mean that early game strategies cannot prevail, ever.
Right. I mean, well, we see Longhzu do them all the time. And, like, they're good at the late game, too, don't get me wrong. But they draft for the early game consistently.
They do.
Right on. So what I want to do now is I want to move over to Group B.
Sorry, Brian.
Which is
we got to talk about it.
We got to talk about it, Brian.
All right.
We're gonna feel a lot better afterwards. We're gonna air it all out. None of us expected it. I wrote 1,500 words on why Immortals is getting out of groups. Literally 6 hours before this thing kicked off. I was there with you. I understand on a very minute level. But this group was the Longhzu group. Who are Longhzu the strongest team at Worlds? Is that the consensus here?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I placed my vote behind Longhzu for sure.
Mm-hmm. See, the thing that I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Definitely seems that way.
See, the thing that I'm worried about well, not necessarily worried about with Longhzu is I feel like we saw this coming into last year with Rox being like the counterfoil to SKT play-wise, and they were the best team in the world, and SKT was kind of secondary coming in. But then SKT adapted to the meta, and when the sword met the shield won. With how Khan has been favoring only carry champions and not really playing very many tanks, and when he does, we have to admit that his play does go down a level just because he's so damn good on these carries. Are we worried about that when they run into SKT and SKT forcing them to play their game? Because I don't think Huni's just going to get run over by Khan.
Well, if you look at SKT's most successful game, I think was when Huni picked Jace. So it's not that different from Longhzu. And only one of those guys can pick Jace. So if either one of them gets it, then that team gets a huge advantage. I think the main thing that will happen in that matchup is that Jace just gets banned.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
The top laners will have to go onto their picks, and we'll see which one plays tanks better, basically, which I still think is Khan.
Fair enough. That's fair.
That's interesting, because I actually, heading into World's group stage, checked Khan's match history for competitive to see how many games of tanks he played. Are you all ready for the answer?
Yes.
1.
Was it an amount? Was it one?
No, he one Gragas game. He played one game of Gragas.
The most aggressive tank in existence. I love it.
Are you counting J4 as a tank? Did he play J4 at all?
I mean,
he plays J4.
He plays
J4 a bunch. He loves J4.
Yeah, it's one of his main picks. He usually plays it I've either seen him go Bruiser, or sometimes when he's just disrespecting, he'll just go Lethality, which is funny as hell. You get those flashback Ray vibes from last year.
The way Khan plays it, no, because most people in competitive go what's Gargoyle Stoneplate third on J4. He usually goes Guardian Angel.
Third. Okay, so it's not a tank when he plays it.
Yeah, he's definitely going more for kind of the carry Bruiser style build. But Longhzu, we saw them. They went 6-0. They had no problem with anybody in their group. I think the story here was the bottom 3 teams, which I just don't even. I don't know if I'm more just devastated for Immortals, or if I'm more just so impressed with the size of Fnatic's balls. I'm gonna be honest. Fnatic walking around with wheelbarrows between their legs. That was insane. We saw 5 straight. They lose. They start out 0-3, then they lose to Longhzu and start 0-4. And then they beat both teams twice in a row without batting an eye. Completely insane, right? What did Fnatic change week to week? Because I thought they looked a lot more proactive in the early game this week around. I thought Brox was ganking a lot better.
They had a ringer. Cody's son in a Fnatic jersey decided this might look good.
Oh my god.
but I think
okay.
it was more of an internal change. I think something changed about their team dynamic and like their willingness to play. Because if you looked at Soaz's tweets in like the first week, he was like not happy at all with like how things were going and like the champion select. Like he was stuck being on the dog champions that he calls them, you know, tanks. So he still played tanks for most of it, but I think they convinced Soaz that he wanted to play League of Legends again, and you know maybe got Reckles to calm down with taking every single CS in the game. So
yeah, there was
I
one
think
point
that
where he
helped
could
a
have.
lot.
There was one point in that Immortals game that they lost where he could have given like his last like 200 CS up and then just been full build.
Yep, and the one they lost to Immortals, Reckles had, or Reckless, I call him Reckles because that's how it's typed. Reckless got full build at 413 CS, and he finished the game with over 600, and some of his teammates were still not full build.
Yikes.
So he's literally just starving his team. That's not giving resources to your carry. That's taking them away from your teammates.
I also thought that for whatever the reason, I thought Soaz showed up in week 2. I thought he played really well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that has to be, like, considering how much crap he's getting. And he did have a terrible week 1, and people are, like, screenshotting tweets. And I get that. Like, yeah, he's, you know, he seemed frustrated. But I think whatever he did, I think he really, like, you know, obviously Reckless still played fantastic, and the team overall looked a lot cleaner. But I thought Soaz really turned his performance around from, like, getting beat by a Nasus, like, in just, like, the most ironic way possible. To like to just like showing up and having some of the better tank performances, probably the best tank performances in week 2 for that group. Really, I mean, he really showed up. Gigabyte Marines. I'm okay. I'm like okay with them going out. Honestly, I don't think they would have done much in quarterfinals, but like, God, they were fun, you guys. I'm so glad this team showed. Like, I don't know where they came from, and I know there's already like talk.
Vietnam.
Like, well,
they
yeah.
come from Vietnam.
You know what I mean, though. Like they were the
I
wild
got
card
you.
team. Yeah, you definitely do. The you know, they were like the wild card team, and then all of a sudden they're like taking TSM to 5 games, doing all this crazy stuff. And I thought overall I was pretty impressed with their performance at Worlds. I thought they had like some strategies that were labeled as cheese that actually, like, when you thought about it, kind of made some sense. Like in its own weird way, like due to their disadvantages. I thought they compensated.
Yeah, I thought the Zillion Rengar comp was the one where I said, wait, maybe these guys aren't stupid. Maybe there's like actual logic behind these strategies, because like it looks completely ridiculous, but then like
Zillion support.
Right.
This is my meme. Is how bad Zillion support is. It's my personal meme. Is how bad.
Once they got past that landing phase and like they didn't completely lose with the Zillion, it actually kind of like started to make sense, because Rengar could just blindly engage and then get Zillion ulted, and nobody on their team ever died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, there were certain things, like, I even thought, like, the Mordekaiser game, like, yeah, okay, that went terribly, but I even thought that, like, what they were trying to do didn't even, like, Mordekaiser got destroyed so hard early on, like, Longhzu just responded so quickly that they didn't have time to even properly set up what they were trying to do, I think. Like, there was a Reddit thread about this, and, you know, how they're trying to get the Tristana ahead. Like, this is actually something kind of similar to what, back in Season 4, in the Season 4 NA Summer Playoffs, Cloud9 used to put Balls and Lemon in the bot lane together and put Sneaky in top lane on Tristana in a 1v1 with the opposing tanker, or even in a 1v2 on a lane swap, like, and just to get him farther ahead in solo XP. So, like, it had some, like, merit to it, but I just don't know if you can put a Mordekaiser against Longhzu anywhere. You know, like, it's just, like, asking for it, you know? So, yeah. But overall, I mean, I think Levi or Levy, I think he's an electric player. I think he's really impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in a major region next year.
I agree with that, especially with 24 teams coming out in EU.
Oh, yeah,
so
definitely.
He's got a lot of places to go.
Yeah, I know. There's going to be a lot more spots for a player like that. And I thought Optimus was not MSI Optimus, who I thought was very fun and very good and had a lot of cool, innovative picks. They played really well on the Fizz, too. That's why I remember him. But he mostly stuck to, like, Syndra and stuff. And, like, I thought he played well, but I don't think he was, like, I think both he and Maple stopped being, like, the 1-2 punches to Levi and Karsa, respectively. I think both, like, Gigabyte Marines and Flash Wolves have a lot of similarities in how they showed up.
Gigabyte Marines definitely, like, made the group fun. They almost kind of remind me of, like, Moscow 5 with how crazy their strategies and how like innovative they can be. And I think it was smart for them to realize, like, if we play this game standard and, you know, if we draft like 2 tanks, Syndra and Kog'Maw, we're gonna lose. We can't play that better than Immortals or Fnatic or Longhzu. We're gonna lose if we do that. We gotta play Mordekaiser and Urgot and Nocturne. The double jungle Nocturne to level 6 was, I thought, the craziest strategy that they did.
I just love Levi's champion pool. Like, I love like him running around playing blue form Kayn and just hard carrying games. Like, who is this guy? It's completely insane. No, yeah, I mean, I think that's why, like, back in the day I was, and by back in the day I mean earlier this year, I was very much in support of Fnatic's animal style, because it like forced them to learn how to play around Reckless, which is what they eventually needed to evolve into. And it was like, yeah, we're not playing conventional League of Legends, but like, let's worry about being conventional when we're actually good. You know, like, it's like, let's worry about being the best in Europe, and then we'll fix our style for the World Championship. So I liked it coming out of Gigabyte Marines, and it happened to really work well, especially with this Urgot pick against our. And then we have to talk about our last place team, Immortals, coming right out of the gate, getting beat by Urgot Kayn, top jungle, which I thought was like, okay, they just weren't ready for that. But it turned out and set the tone for the entire night, and Immortals lost 4 straight games. What happened? Was this a mental collapse? Were there certain things playstyle-wise that they didn't do well? Guys, like, I'm at a loss here.
The first 2 games, I wouldn't quite say mental collapse. The second 2, definitely, I would say that was the cause. In their last game, playing against Fnatic, if you looked at the player cams when they were like loading into the game and like in the early stages of the game, the players just looked absolutely dead. Pobelter looked like he was about to fall asleep on his keyboard. Like, they were not ready to play that game. And I don't know what the difference is between Immortals and Fnatic. That Fnatic was able to play 5 games that night, and Immortals wasn't even able to play 4, but that ended up being the biggest difference, and I think the reason that Fnatic made it out instead of Immortals, because they had the endurance to keep going.
I think that something I thought was interesting is I read an article with an interview from McSmithy, I think the day before the Group B conclusion, and it was McSmithy saying how the thing that we're missing right now as a team is someone who just has like just the gall, just to pull the trigger and just make that, like, you know, that game-changing play and like step up and put it all on the line in that one moment. And I mean, these Fnatic players, you know, some of these guys are young, but I mean, Reckless and I mean, Soaz is known to like just completely be written off as washed up and then show up at a World Championship and be the best top laner in his group. Like, that's, right. I don't think he did that just because of his week 1 performance, but he showed up when it mattered. Reckless too, like, I don't know if it's made just cohesion or like some sort of synergy issue with like Immortals, or if they just need somebody to be able to step up and do that. Were there specific things like in their gameplay that you guys thought looked way worse? Like a certain concept they weren't executing well on, or what?
I definitely think in the first game they played against Fnatic, they were relying on a comeback because they did not. Their bot lane was getting smashed, and they were doing nothing about it. And in solo queue, like, that's what you do, right? If your Kog'Maw dies 4 times, you cut your losses, but you can't do that in competitive. You can't do that. Like, you gotta toss this guy into a lane swap, like, pronto. And they didn't do that. They just kept sending him back bot lane to die.
I really thought that that Ole didn't look as good as he did in North America on the world stage. I didn't think that he played like poorly or anything, but I expected some more stand-up performances from him, especially like in a group where, like, you know, like Gigabyte Marines is subbing in their secondary top laner as their support in some of these games. He's playing like Heal Ignite Lulu and all this stuff. And Fnatic's support Jess is a former professional mid laner and AD carry, and he's not a bad support, honestly. But I thought that Ole really would have had the upper hand as one of the top 2 supports in this group, and I don't think he really showed up in that aspect.
Well, if you remember Immortals from spring, back with the kind of the Lulu Karma meta, Ole didn't look that impressive in that meta. It wasn't until the Playmaker meta started that you were like, holy crap, this guy's amazing.
Right.
That's right. You're right. He is more of like a Thresh Bard, Morgana guy.
And if he has access to those champions, yeah, he does. But what you were expecting is like Ole doesn't get to be a support in this meta. He's an Ardent Sensor.
He's an item.
I think Ole's not good at sitting behind his AD carry, and he doesn't have a good AD carry to sit behind. Like, Cody's son was not the carry that any team was looking for at Worlds. Like, he's the rookie AD carry, and it definitely showed in these series, especially with like flashing into the enemy team on that last play instead of hitting barrier. And I think he wasn't quite ready for Worlds. They'll definitely be better next year if they stick with this. But another thing, Immortals definitely overrated Ezreal. I think Xmithy picked Ezreal way too many times, and it was not the style they should have been playing.
I think they may have come in with the concept that like Ezreal was like a must pick, and like it is definitely meta. But I also saw teams succeed like without emphasizing it. And I think like obviously Cloud9 has contracts, like they're gonna play as much Ezreal as they can, style-wise, right? But I like Xmithy better on like the Jarvan and the Sejuani. Memes aside, because Sejuani is good. Like I think that they could have prioritized Ezreal less. Like he's like and still been okay. Even if they were like worried about it against a certain team, they could have banned it if they had to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to touch on too, because like it's unfair to just harp on one player. Obviously, when it's a team as a cohesive unit that's kind of experienced a drop off from week 1 to week 2. But despite picking the more carry, kind of leading the forefront oriented Ezreal jungle more in week 2 than he ever did in week 1. Xmithy in Group 2 had the single largest drop-off in both CS, gold per minute, and kill participation as any player in the group. Yeah, so not to just place it all on one person, obviously, but when that's your kind of commander, your veteran player who's kind of making the important shot calls, having that big of a drop-off, I think it's significant for a younger team like Immortals to, I don't know, they don't really have the experience to pick up the slack when it happens like that. So. And
that's what I wanted to touch on with Immortals is that they can take solace in the fact that like this is their first world championship. It's the first time that they have failed, and like how many times has Doubleth failed on the world stage? Like Cody's son can come back from that mentally, and he can make it again, and he can try again. And
let's remember Immortals was the 7th place team in spring, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like and literally try to explain this to someone back in time, like in 2015, like, and then or even last year, and then once they traded Dardoch for Xmithy, they qualified for Worlds. Like no one saw this coming. This team, I mean, yes, historic collapse here in week 2, but I think that for the year, like I think they can be pretty proud of where they were, and I think like a lot of these issues, it was like the first time on the world stage for a lot of these guys. Well, I guess only the bottom lane, but everybody I think really like you said, Zeke, team effort. Like yeah, Xmithy had a drop off, but honestly, I wasn't really impressed by anybody not named Flame in week 2. I thought Flame had a fine week 2, and I thought everybody else really dropped off.
I agree with that.
Is there something about the way that North America plays League of Legends because like if you look at the last 3 years of the World Championship, this is the 3rd year in a row where North America has been 6-3 in week 1. There's been different combinations, but it's always 6-3 in week 1, and then we have 0-10, that includes that tiebreaker in week 2 in 2015, and then in 2016 I believe it was 2-8. And I think it was 2-8. I'm not entirely sure about that.
I think it was 3-6. There were two
tiebreakers. There were 2 tiebreakers, so it had to be. Maybe it was. Maybe you're right. It was, but like,
C9 didn't have a tiebreaker. TSM didn't.
Well, then I mean, yeah, okay. If it was 3-6, then either way, we're seeing a significant change in week 2, and like we don't see. I feel like we don't consistently see that from every other region. Like, yeah, Europe had a better week 2 this year, but I don't think that's like much of a trend as this North American thing.
I think North America, like they just. Well, in 2015, North American teams really found success with the combination of at the time super meta combination of Azir and Tristana,
Yep.
and they were smashing people with Azir Tristana. Azir Tristana was working so well for them, so much siege power, so much like late game scaling, so much wave clear, so much utility,
And it was like the NA take bot, then immediately take mid thing. That's all that NA did anyway. It's just that the meta totally fit it.
You gotta adapt, and what the other teams were able to look at is they say like, hey, these Americans are pretty good at Azir Tristana. Maybe if we don't let them have Azir Tristana, we'll beat them.
Ah, dang it. How did we not see that coming? they just took the champions away and we can't do anything. But yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. It's not really something that North American teams are changing that they do worse in week 2. It's that they're not changing, and that all the other teams are changing and adapting, and they learn how to play against the one style that North America is willing to play, and then we don't know what to do. Because that was the first thing I noticed about Gigabyte Marines came out in week 2, and when they were ahead of Longhzu for most of the early game, and it's like they changed their style and they learned how to play differently, and they started beating Longhzu, and then Immortals picked Ezreal like 3 games in a row. It's like we don't change anything, and we expect to still somehow get results out of it.
That's definitely like, we got to prepare more strategies.
Right.
And we got to do that more effectively.
And how, like, TSM, I know they're not in this group yet, but how they only pick scaling comps.
We'll get there,
like,
Brian.
We'll get there.
It's going to be...
I'm ready to complain about it now.
Yeah, we both. But let's take a little break from NA Sad Boys, and let's go to Group C, the only group without an NA team. How do we feel about G2? Are we doing classic G2 disappointment? Do we understand their predicament? Because for me, I thought Samsung looked a little weaker than I expected, but I thought RNG was extremely strong, and I think is the best non-Korean team at Worlds right now. And I think they're better than Samsung. So I guess they're in my top 3 right now.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I gave I gave TSM the allowance for basically the same group last year, so I'm willing to give G2 the same allowance. Like, I'll be consistent here. G2 played better than the results reflected.
I think that's fair. As far as, did we all see RNG coming out of this group in the first seed? Because I know that I didn't, but I was wondering what you guys were thinking, if that was a surprise to you guys and how they played. Because I thought they looked way smarter than I think anybody thought they did. I thought their late game shot calling was way better. I thought MLXG was a significantly better player than we expected. What is your guys' takeaway? Does RNG surprise you guys too?
RNG definitely pleasantly surprised me. They played to their comfort and did it well. And one of the things that they did super well was so there's a concept, parallel scaling versus non-parallel scaling. I invented the terms. It's like my auto spacing.
Patent pending.
Patent pending. Okay, so parallel scaling is when you pick everything to power spike at the same time. So it's all early game, all mid game, or all late game on your team. So you can guess what non-parallel scaling is. It's the opposite of that. It's when you have like some early game pressure to help you get to the late game. And this tournament, you'll see from the drafts, so much index on parallel scaling. RNG, one of the teams extremely successful with the non-parallel scaling. And I think a lot of teams shied away from the idea of the non-parallel scaling because the idea is like, well, what if we get outscaled? And RNG was one of the first teams with the stones to say, well, what if we don't?
Yeah.
I definitely like the way you put that. I also thought what was really interesting is this is the first Royal team with Uzi on it that hasn't been an Uzi-centric team. And I think, Brian, we talked about this, about how this team plays around Xiaohu a lot more traditionally. MLXG is in the bot lane a lot, but really Xiaohu is he's like kind of the the spearhead of this team.
Right.
But we saw, I just could not believe the level that Uzi played at this group stage. I thought it was maybe his best ever. He was, what was it? This week, in week 2, he did 43% of RNG's damage. And that wasn't like other people on his team underperforming, in my opinion. I think that was just him like just taking the game like by the throat.
He played Vayne.
That was so sick. Rage played
That's
Vayne.
not even a good champion.
He doesn't care, dude. He was this little last game. He made it. I mean, like, he played it well. It was awesome. I'm like, man, there's like 4 better picks here, but I'm so okay with this.
Rageblade Vayne too.
Yeah, it was Rageblade Vayne.
Yeah, first item Rageblade just doesn't care, and I thought he played well. It was pretty awesome. I thought so. Okay, I haven't watched a lot of Samsung games this year, which is totally my fault. I did watch a lot of Samsung games in spring when Ambition went and got married, and Haru was just destroying people. And it was so weird for me to see that now Samsung is Cloud9, KR, and Ambition is high. Because that team looks like a mid-tier LCS team when he's not in the lineup, if we're talking about macro play. Like, Haru's for sure very talented, but, like, they almost lost to Fenerbahce. Like, like got outplayed and out-rotated by Fenerbahce. What do you think that is the only thing that Samsung need to fix? Is it just, like, Ambition need to start every single game now? And he just needs to start every game? Or did you guys... I thought Crown didn't have a very good group stage, but what is Samsung going to do? Are they going to... Because they're up against Longhzu here. In the quarterfinals, just looking ahead for a second.
Well,
they're not going to have a fun time.
Yeah, if you're going to take the comparison that they're like the KR version of, Cloud9 when they had high.
Yeah, they just don't know. They don't look like they know what they're doing without Ambition on the Rift.
So, Cloud9 was addicted to high. They straight up had like an addiction to him. And they realized that there were certain things about him that were bad. It's like, this guy doesn't have a good champion pool. This guy is not insanely impressive mechanically. But the shot calls, it's like, when you first start with high, like, things seem so great. Like, that euphoric first high, High, H-I-G-H.
I have no idea where you're going with this, so carry on.
Basically, what I'm saying is, like, when you have an addiction, it's something that physically your body believes that it needs. And
so you're saying that when Ambition is in the lineup, Samsung doesn't know what they're doing because Samsung is worried that they don't know what they're doing with that Ambition. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Basically. And in order to fix that, they need to wean themselves off of Ambition. And, like, slowly.
So
how high could we get? Basically, high is high. How high could we get on high? Now you guys are just memeing me.
So if Samsung plays Ambition if Samsung plays Ambition the entirety of this series, and I'm not talking about because they lost with Ambition in the lineup, but they did have a game or two in there with Haru, made that through up the natural order and led to a future game loss. Do you think that Samsung gets first seed in this group if they just leave Ambition in the whole time?
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that thing that holds Samsung back from being like what I initially put them first seed getting out of this group.
Same here.
I think that they suffer from like the similar thing that NA does, where I just saw like no adaptation from week 1 to week 2, and thankfully they were just in a group where their playstyle allowed them to get by second seed anyways because they just played G2's game more polished.
That was the thing that freaked me out the most, was like that, like G2, even if like G2 can't get out of this group unless RNG just underperforms, because Samsung should beat G2 every game they play because it's the same game. Sorry, continue.
And so I feel like if they're gonna carry on that same sort of play style where they're just gonna play what works, whether or not it is working at the current time, I think they're just gonna get ran over by Longhzu. I think that there's little to no adaptation besides like maybe switching in Haru for like a breath of fresh air. But I think that without ambition and without a strong sense of like being able to change what needs to be changed on a dime, I think they get 3-0'd in the first round, to be honest.
Wow. All right, that's spicy. Let's let's jump back to the groups real quick, and then we're gonna get into quarters. And I do like the spicy predictions. I like it coming from Rio,
Okay.
Indy. So good work. I want to give a quick eulogy for 1907 Fenerbahce. They tried
moment
their
of silence.
I had fun. I had a ton of fun with that team. I thought that Crash having to sub in was really fun to see Crash and Frozen reunited. I thought Frozen had some great performances.
Yeah.
I thought he played pretty well. I think Thaldren's a super good player. I hope we see this team at many more international events, because I thought style-wise they really can they can take a team by surprise, and they got close a couple times to beating some of these teams that we consider world class. So I think that has to be celebrated, and I think we're definitely between them and Gigabyte Marines in an era where we can't be lost to a wildcard team. It's bruh, these top wildcard teams are could be top 3 teams in NA at this point. They're good. If we're speaking relative to a lot of the major regions level of play, some of these guys could probably beat Flash Wolves in in a Taiwanese season or something, right?
Yeah.
What do we think changed to make the wildcard regions better? Is it just more worldwide infrastructure coming in? Is it just the increased visibility on the scene? Riot's been doing a lot better job incorporating wildcard teams in their scenes and communities in the world's scape, in my opinion, in the international scape.
They need to more competition. One of the things that just major regions have as an advantage is just better teams to practice against. Even the teams that aren't going to get to Worlds are just way better than the teams that aren't going to get to Worlds from a wild card region. If you ever want to watch something real spicy, watch a local game from a wild card region, and watch Gigabyte Marines play the 4th best or something Vietnamese team. There's only 6, by the way.
Right. You have these teams at the top who match the major regions' top teams, but it's very it's a huge drop off after those top teams in most of these regions. Similar to the LMS and how it kind of drops off after the top 2 or 3, historically speaking. Yeah, you have you think more wildcard events. So we have because you really need you basically need an MSI for wildcard teams 4 times a year, right? Because it's only the number 1 or number 2 team from each region that's good. That's a good team.
Yeah.
Well, I had a lot of fun.
And then
with
I
them.
think. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
I was going to comment on how Thorin brought up the way that the group's infrastructure is in place now and how it's kind of problematic. Because there is a world where Flash Wolves is treated equal as Longhzu, and they're both first seed in their respective groups, even though we all know that they're worlds apart. So if G2 was placed in any other group playing the exact same way that they had, I guarantee they would have made it up maybe 2nd seed, or at least had a... There's nothing wrong with G2's play, which is unfortunate for them. And I feel the same thing about the wildcard teams like Fenerbahce and Gigabyte Marines, where since their wildcard teams are kind of treated on a lower player level than every other team. And don't get me wrong, there are no Korea, there are no Chinese teams, but it's just unfortunate that they got the luck of the draw that they did, where Gigabyte Marines is pulling these huge upsets against major NA and EU LCS regions, are tied for 4th in their group because there's not enough light shown on their region respective.
No, that's
so
definitely
hopefully that's something that gets fixed in the future. That I'd like to see at least.
I for the record, I'll do a whole show on Worlds format. I have a lot of things to say, so I'm totally with you on that. But I do think that these groups shaked down pretty well. I think that Group C was our definitive group of death. Yeah. But I will agree with you. There's obviously flaws to the format, but I don't know if any format could have saved TSM from Group D.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
I don't know what format could have done it, because I don't know if there's an easier group in the history of human existence. Flash Wolves are our number 1 seed, and they might be a top 10 team at this tournament. Maybe. It's a fringe pick. We're talking 9th at best, right? And then WE, my darlings, that you guys didn't believe in for the number 1 team, all right? I knew they were fine, but what happened to TSM here? That's we can talk about Group D as a whole, but that's the main storyline here. They should have gotten out one of the 2 seeds. Was this Misfits really showing up this hard, or was it TSM just massively underperforming? Because I thought their early game might have been the worst in the entire group stage.
It was the worst in the entire group stage.
I haven't seen the stats.
They put up the stats. It was the worst.
I think we were at a point where Echo Fox would have had a better early game at this tournament.
Echo Fox is a pretty good early game.
They have a good early game. That's what I'm saying.
They just don't close.
That's true. I like that's what I'm saying. Though, like that shouldn't be happening. Like, I thought that Svenskeren was trying to like curb his like pretty like one-dimensional like pathing tendencies and like trying to be more safe, but that just let him like being a little out of sync with the rest of the team. 'Cause he's basically trying to adjust his playstyle like mid-group, and I think that really like I think he got scapegoated a little bit. I think TSM as a whole could have performed better, but I do think that was like a huge crux of their problem. His level of play.
Oh, I want to go back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, the craft of having a pushing lane. TSM like never drafted that.
Yeah,
And
they never had winning lanes.
And they went for like Doublelift went for some greedy starts that like didn't consider early game at all. Like so many people, like almost every other Kog'Maw player at Worlds who took Warlords just because like, oh, that extra little bit of healing, that extra move speed keeps you safer, gets you over the early game hump of Kog'Maw. It helps a little bit. Maybe the DPS isn't as crisp without Fervor, but guess what? You're still Kog'Maw. And Fervor actually doesn't increase it by that much because Kog'Maw doesn't really scale off of like directly off AD. It's almost all attack speed and on hit. So I thought the Fervor from Doublelift was real questionable.
Me too.
And a lot of their drafts were questionable. Like they picked Nami. That champion's bad.
I mean, that's that bad. I think she's really underrated.
I think that Nami is like a fine, like, you know, Janna and Lulu are banned, and Biofrost has historically been able to pull Nami out in that pocket situation and do fine with it. What I didn't get was...
I mean, I think Biofrost Nami is good. I think he's good on that champion, but I think there's a reason that that champion doesn't see picks even when the top tier Ardent Sensor users are off the table.
I think that the thing that really perplexed me the most was that, and I get like hyperscaling AD carries at the name of the game, and I'm not suggesting anything other than that, but I would have liked to see it maybe like slightly less Kog'Maw and a bit more. If Doublelift on a world scale is probably best in his laning phase, like he's a good AD carry all around, but I think his laning phase is probably the most dominant aspect of his game. Why not cater to that more? I feel like they didn't really try to do much of anything in the early game at all. Like, and I'm not talking like, oh man, they had ideas and they didn't execute them. Like, I feel like TSM's plan was to pretty much not do much of anything in the early game entirely.
And even with teamfighting comps like that and scaling comps, I think they played teamfights pretty poorly.
Which is insane, but that's like their thing. They're always good at that. That's how they win games in NA when they're behind. When they're down 5k to Echo Fox, they just out-teamfight and get a Baron. You know, like
if you look at the difference between different teams by when their AD carry starts getting hit in a team fight, TSM does everything like the exact opposite after that moment than the other teams do. Like I was watching Cloud9 play, and multiple times Sneaky got caught out in a team fight, and the caster was like, "Well, Sneaky's dead. They lost this team fight," and then Sneaky survives because his entire team dives onto the person attacking him and like defends him and peels for him. But when it happened to TSM, it was like, oh man, Doublelift is getting hit. Fuck, we lost this team fight. Let's leave. And like nobody dove in and tried to save Doublelift, or at least not nearly as much as other teams were.
I definitely think that's true. That's something that like, as an AD carry player, like that is my favorite thing about this meta. It's like I don't get it too often in solo queue, but like that feeling when like you take one step a little bit too far forward and your entire team just panics and throws on the lockets and the redemptions and the shields and the Knight's Vows just to make sure you're safe. That is such a good feeling. And that just like, take it, please, Liv. We need to win. We need to take objectives.
It's like 40 minutes in. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me before. But still, I just feel like this is the third year in a row TSM's failed to make the other groups, and this is by far the easiest group. We saw probably the most confident tweets coming out. There's the infamous Dream Group reaction video that's from Reddit for the last like 36 hours. What is this going to be big changes for TSM? I mean, we've already seen that Parth announced that this is his last time on stage. What do you think that we are going to see any like big roster moves from TSM? You know, after last year, Double Lift, for example, was very disheartened and he took the spring off. What do you guys expect to see in terms of any TSM personnel changes?
I think TSM's got to change something. Like, maybe not their roster. The roster, I think, is the scapegoat thing to look at. I think it's the first thing you can look at, and I think it's worth looking at. But they got to change more than their.
Yeah.
And they got to change, like, their attitude. They got to change their approach. They got to change the way they play the game. And, you know, maybe you replace Sven Skjern for a better jungler. Like, let's say you get some dream pickup. Okay, you still need to shore up a lot of the other stuff you did wrong. Like, he was not the only problem.
Did I just hear TSM Mike Young? Because I was thinking the exact same thing.
Well, I said TSM Levy, but Mike Young would be good too.
Yeah. I would totally see that. I don't know. Do you guys,
TSM Rainover?
Oh my god! All right, before we get like too far down the rabbit hole, do you guys actually think Sven Skjern's done? Will this be his last year of play?
I'm
not saying on TSM, I'm saying in general.
It's hard to say because if you look at like the last game they played, TSM versus Misfits, like it was like 90% of the Sejuani ults landed on Gragas. So when Sven Skjern was playing Sejuani, and it's kind of hard to look at gameplay like that and say that it's not the fault of the player and that like it doesn't need to change, because I mean that's a consistent problem that we saw not just in this game but like throughout Sven Skjern's play in this tournament and in NA playoffs. Like I just don't think he's that good. I think he should be replaced.
One thing Doublelift brought up is he said, like, a lot of people harsh on Sven Skjern, but a lot of the times, like, things are happening to him that we need to respond to, and it's actually our fault that these things are happening to him. And with that in mind, I reviewed some of the games, and I was like, holy crap, Doublelift's actually right. There are times that things are happening to Sven Skjern, like, he's going for this invade when, like, he has, like, a pushing lane, and then, like, the person who was pushing just, like, finishes clearing the wave and then recalls. And then Sven Skjern's by himself. And, like, it's like, wow, they actually just completely didn't back him up. But then I think you're also right, is that, like, Sven Skjern also does things that are just flat out bad.
Right. I think his invades can be excused because we can't hear comms and we don't know exactly what's happening. Could be Sven Skjern just blindly walking into the wrong places, or it could be his team's fault for not telling him not to go there or not backing up or whatever it is. But in team fights, he's just not doing anything that you would expect a professional player to be doing. Like he's engaging at random points when his team can't back him up and ulting the wrong people. And the entire game isn't his fault, but I'd say a majority of the team fights fall on his back.
I also just think that as far as, because I think TSM has a pretty good work ethic, and I think like their attitude, at least you know, like more than most teams, I think they have like a pretty good mentality on the game. But I think they come into Worlds with these like occasionally strange approaches of like Bjergsen being very like passive, and I don't think that's like him playing badly. I think like he's just not being as proactive as I thought he could be on certain picks, or you know, Hanser hasn't played Jace. I don't even remember the last time he played Jace, and we're going to put that in a do-or-die matchup, especially, I mean, not to, like, factor in last year, it's the same exact thing, though. I mean, he built incorrectly on Jace and got smashed both years in a row, and, you know, I'm sure he could be a fine Jace, but it's not something he's played a lot. Like, I thought that was a peculiar choice in such, like, a very important game. I know you don't want to draft just to comfort, but do you guys think the Jace pick was a big culprit in this loss as well? Because I thought Max Lord just went over and over again to top lane, and like even Sven Skjern hovered around there a lot. There was nothing he could do.
The responsibility was really on like the top lane pressure to get that Jace ahead. And like when you see Khan play Jace, he is one of the most famous Jace in the world. His Jace is impeccable, but BDD and sorry, I blanked for a second on the Longhzu jungler's name? Cuz.
Cuz.
BDD and Cuz are always creating leads for him. And even if you are like mechanically impeccable at this champion, you're not so much mechanically better than the other person on the other side of the screen that you're just gonna randomly create these advantages on your own all the time. You're probably gonna have that happen like once in a group stage.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Jace is that, well, TSM definitely thought Jace was stronger than it is, or than it was in that game. Misfits knew pretty well how to play against it. They shut it down pretty early, and Cho'Gath ended up having a CS lead at like 12 minutes over Jace, which should not
never,
in any situation
Never happen.
So they definitely did something wrong with that pick.
What do you guys think of the Rise?
I think
Rise is the elephant in the room because I saw a lot of criticism of Rise, and I thought we saw a lot of good Rise play. Not just like from like be like, oh, obviously the Koreans and the Chinese played Rise well. We saw good Rise out of NA. Like,
I thought we saw
Cloud9's first game against AHQ. That was a really good, well executed Rise by Jensen.
But
and
I think what the problem was that like we saw a good individual Rise play, and I think that Cloud9 was able to pull it off because they know their default is to play around Jensen. But I think what we saw was teams as a whole not knowing how to utilize the Rise, even if their mid laner was necessarily a good Rise at this tournament. I don't think the champion was used to its full potential, and that's why its downsides were, I think, and ended up being more heavily weighted than its upsides. Just because I don't think teams knew how to capitalize on it. It kind of just came back into the meta, right? Like, I didn't see very many people playing it, like, in the playoffs. I mean, there's a few people who've always stuck to it. Caps is one of them. But I think it just seemed like this pick does have a lot of upside, but it's a hard pick to pull off as a team, even if you have a good Rise player.
Yeah, it is. Because you really have to, like, have that good, like, macro that, like, Rise always seems best to me when the Realm Warp is being used in creative ways to, like, make things happen that the other team, like, can't do anything about. And you see stuff like that, and it's just, like, the skill... People have talked about this before, but the skill ceiling on that ability is so insane, and it's one of the reasons why it's actually one of my favorite abilities in the entire game.
Me too.
Is because the things that you can do with it are so crazy to even think about. And then like when you see like a Rise ult where it's like I think Jensen had a Rise ult where it was like he didn't even take the portal, only Impact took the portal. And then Impact used that to engage, and it's like he didn't have his flash, but it's like I got your flash right here, buddy. Here's your engage. And that I didn't see TSM doing any sort of anything proactively, let alone any of those proactive Rise ults. I think if you don't use that Rise ult proactively, it's just like you're missing an ability on this champion. You have 3 abilities.
Just play Cassio at that point, right? Like,
yeah.
Right.
I remember seeing a Rise. I don't remember what it was, but I remember seeing a Rise ult where like somebody teleported like they realm warped a minion wave like out of vision from the other team closer to provide more pressure on a side lane, and then took Baron off that side lane pressure. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? That was insane!" like just living in 3017 with that realm warp. But yeah, I just don't think a lot of teams have been utilizing it to its maximum potential. One of the teams who did some, they didn't. Did they play? Did Misfits play Rise at all this tournament?
I don't think they touched it.
Does Radovage's Nashor's Tooth Orianna count as a DPS match?
Okay.
Does that kind of count?
I mean, Crumbs had a really funny tweet about this. Is he was saying like he was talking about the pros and cons. He was saying the buy isn't as clean. The first buy isn't as clean. Catalyst is 1100 gold. Lost Chapter is 900 gold. You don't get the CDR early, and then it's like pros, you get more DPS. But then he brought it back to the cons. He's like, why is Orianna in attack range?
Right.
Yeah,
that's the main problem with that.
Especially
but
in these
Misfits
comps.
did pick Rise though.
Did they?
Oh, they did?
Yeah, when they played against TSM and when Misfits lost.
Interesting.
Oh, that's right.
It was Rise versus Cassiopeia mid, and then in their rematch when TSM picked Rise, their first ban was Cassiopeia. So they thought they knew how to deal with that mid matchup, and then I'm pretty sure Power of Evil on Orianna still won lane versus the Rise. Or at least it turned out in Orianna's favor a lot. I don't remember how specifically the laning phase went.
How do we feel about Misfits' performance as a whole in this group stage?
Misfits surprised me. They were, I think they had some innovative picks, but like innovative picks in a way where it's like, this is not entirely outside of the meta. It's like that, like you don't lose me completely. Okay, you lost me completely with the Yasuo, but maybe they got a little carried away there.
It's a Gnar counter, man. that's the only reason. That must be
okay. But the problem with picking Yasuo at the competitive level is that you are at the competitive level and you are Yasuo.
Yeah, that is bad. Even if it counters Gnar, it's
right.
That was interesting for sure. I really thought that that Maxler established himself as a pretty strong jungler in this group.
Yes.
I think that while Svenskeren may have had a poor tournament, I don't think that Karsa or Kondi should be taken lightly, and I think that he played pretty well even in the losses. And I also think that Hansama really stepped up his game from Europe.
Right.
I thought that he was really, really strong. Like I know a lot of
Ignar though.
Ignar. I wasn't surprised. Ignar's a beast. Like he's that guy.
I don't watch much Europe. I don't watch much European LCS, so this was my first exposure to Ignar. I've heard of him, but it was a treat to watch. It was like, and it did open my eyes to kind of take a relook at Ardent Sensor, because people look at games where like, if you have a sensor and they don't, the game is on the clock. Because it's like, oh, our 80 carry just has better statistics than yours. Okay. Realistically, 25% attack speed, 25 on hit damage. Okay, on this patch it's 35 and 35 late game, but the healing's not there. Is that going to make or break the game? Probably not. Ardent Sensor's ridiculous, like, stat efficiency is going to be at the strongest point in the early game. Because, like, that's when, like, the small stat differences matter more, is in the early game. And in late game, like, you have that extra avenue in with the Thresh and the, or something like Alistair. So, whereas the late game strength of the Ardent Sensor, I don't actually think is Ardent Sensor. It's just like, you've given Kog'Maw an avenue to scale and you have a Janna to protect him. Like, and that's a formula we've seen before. This is not new.
Right, it's more about like how Ardent Sensor just accelerates the hypercarries into like their hypercarry phase, right? Like you can get to that point a lot earlier with the amplifications, but as far as late game goes, it doesn't make as big of a difference.
Right.
So
I didn't think the non-Ardent Sensor was like as crazy. Like people at first, like people were like, "No Ardent Sensor, what are you doing?" And I was kind of in that boat too. But I don't think no Ardent Sensor is as crazy as people. And I definitely will think Misfits should do more of that, because it's one way to create like that proactivity. And
yeah,
see,
and
like,
Ignar has been their playmaker, like historically.
Yeah, especially with picks like Blitzcrank. Like, who else picks that?
He drew bans. He drew bans in the
Right.
meta. That's pretty impressive. Do you guys think that Misfits getting out of this group was more of I mean, obviously Misfits showed up more than we expected. Obviously they have a part in this. But was it more about TSM underperforming, or was it more about Misfits like rising to the occasion? What do you think was the bigger factor?
TSM underperforming.
I actually think it'd be unfair to say that. I think that Misfits brought the heat, like, for lack of a better term. Like, Hansama.
Oh my god, that's
a
terrible pun, dude. Holy crap, dude. Oh my god. Was that on purpose?
No, it wasn't. I was just trying to use
phenomenal.
a metaphor.
Sorry, move on. They brought the heat. Yes, okay.
I just think that Hansama, like, it boggled my mind how crazy crazy consistent he was over the course of several games. Because, you know, standout performances here and there, he's a young, mechanically gifted AD carry that's bound to come eventually. But he was just so well positioned for like 9 out of 10 team fights. He was just right where he needed to be to pressure objectives. He was always making sure that like he was never putting himself at risk the way that other, top level AD carries were in the same group. Like there were times where Doublelift would get caught out, and there's just nothing that he could have done besides maybe not be positioned where he was. I think that's another thing. TSM had a lot of like major positional errors as far as team fights go, which didn't allow them to get their bread and butters as clean as they would have liked. Maxlor played incredibly. Like there was no better way that I could see them playing against that Jace to shut him down and make him build Bork 30 minutes into the game on Jace. I literally think that Misfits earned their spot, well deserved. I think that even if TSM had played, as we would have expected them to, I can't for sure say that they would have beaten what looked to be peak form Misfits, to be completely honest.
Brian, what do you like? TSM underperforming or Misfits rising above?
If you think about the way the group stages worked, wasn't it Flash Wolves beating TSM?
Yeah.
In like 24 minutes.
Misfits.
Yes.
So like if TSM would have performed as expected, then they wouldn't have lost to Flash Wolves, and they never would have been in the tiebreaker with Misfits.
Yeah.
So
you're actually right.
Yeah, I think a sharper TSM wins that game. I mean, that was the only game Flash Wolves won. They were 0-5, and then they beat TSM in 24 minutes.
So it's kind of a workaround there. Like if you look at specifically the Misfits versus TSM matchup, then it's definitely Misfits performing well or better than expected that caused the difference rather than TSM underperforming. But if you look at TSM versus Flash Wolves, then it's definitely TSM underperforming. So
how sad for the Flash Wolves also.
They are not in... I mean, Karsa still looks like good. He's still a good jungler, but I don't think as electric as he used to be. Maple, I think, has definitely like demoted himself from like world-class hard carry to like a pretty good mid laner who can like hold his own. But I think he was a lot less impressive this year than the previous years.
I want to see I want to see Flash Wolves like change it up. I want to see them also learning something new. I think they suffered from similar problems to the NA where they stuck to their one style that they knew worked and never changed, like even when it wasn't working. And like this is a team that like Karsa Maple Synergy, we heard that a million times, but it's like they never give themselves a safety net for late game because they never play around bot, so they don't have as much consistent DPS as they should because their AD carry is always just like down in items. So they never close, and that's been the storyline for them for 2 years straight.
There's also something that needs to be said about everybody's been focused. I want to kind of go back to a point Zeke made about Misfits earning their spot here, and how in the midst of everybody like freaking out over Doublelift's like 6-death Kog'Maw in that first Misfits game that they lost, like people kind of undervalued that Hansama played an incredible Xayah that game. Like yes, Doublelift didn't respect him to the level he should have, but I also thought like he showed up and was the better AD carry, like definitively in that game. And I think that
agreed
for the entirety of the group stage, I thought that he played super well.
Yeah, I think Hansama's Xayah was one of the best performances we've seen at Worlds.
Very impressive. Do we have anything more in this group, or do you guys want to jump into quarterfinals?
Let's jump into quarterfinals.
All right, excellent. So, pulling up the quarterfinals here, we have SKT versus Misfits. We have Cloud9 versus Team WE. We have Fnatic versus RNG. And then we have Samsung Galaxy versus Longhzu. Now, I think this overall is probably the most, out of these 8 teams, probably the best draw that could have happened.
Yes.
What do you guys think of how this draw shook down?
I am so happy that Longhzu and SKT are on opposite sides of the bracket so that they can meet in the finals.
Same here. Like that was the number one thing that I wanted.
Right.
I'm so glad.
I think this gives us the opportunity for the best possible matchups. We could see SKT versus RNG, and Longhzu versus Samsung. Like all of the good teams play against each other.
Yeah, I do think you see like Misfits are a bit of a sacrificial lamb here, but I also think based on their level of play, I think they were the weakest Western team of the 3 as it is, and I think like I mean, like I'm okay with making that choice for like how good the rest of this group draw looks. Like
Yeah,
I think that
I agree.
I think like just to do a quick snapshot. I mean, Fnatic RNG is going to be. I think it's obvious. It's very clear which team is better, but that'll be explosive. Those teams are both early game brawlers. The individual talents there. Samsung versus Longhzu is a beautiful clash of styles for the two best teams in Korea in summer. And I think you know what? I think Cloud9 got the best team they could have drawn. I think Cloud9 that's the best chance that they have. So let's start there with our last slice of apple pie. Cloud9 versus Team WE.
I think it's pretty likely Cloud9 at least takes some A game off Team WE because Team WE is very good, but they're not 100% consistent. They flood some stuff from time to time, and I think Cloud9 has the stuff to punish that. And as far as Cloud9 winning the series, I wouldn't predict it, but I wouldn't be like, oh my god, this is the craziest thing that ever happened in esports if it did.
I think that, I think World Elite has some high variance in their early games where they'll just occasionally just look completely anemic in the first 15 minutes for no reason. And I think Cloud9's actually been the more consistent team of the two, even though WE has had higher highs, and Mystic has just been completely insane. I think he's, I think we're maybe looking like top 2 at 80 carries in this tournament, like right behind Prey. Like, so I think, for me personally, I think that what's going to be really interesting is if Contracts can take it to Condi, and I think it's going to be a matter of, I want to see Cloud9 stay proactive, because I think that they did a much better, if you're comparing to their NA Summer, their early game was much better. Yes, they play around Jensen almost entirely, but that's okay when you're doing it this effectively, I feel. Like, teams aren't able to, like, more often than not, succumb to it anyway. What is Cloud9 going to have to do? Brian, I want to ask you, what are they going to have to do in this series to take down Mystic and the rest of WE?
Well, I think that the team fights will probably be one of their main benefits, because I don't think that they will have much success in the laning phase. Definitely not their bot lane, at least. The whole sneaky and laning phase meme could come back against playing against Mystic. But I think Cloud9 is one of the better teams in the tournament at playing around their AD carry and like focusing on keeping that DPS threat alive. And I think that's their best chance, but it's not a very good chance. And I don't think a very likely scenario.
I think one of their best chances is at least throughout play-ins and the first week of groups, Shie didn't impress me. They made sure to pick up some comfort picks for him in like week 2. Like he got the Lucian, and I was happy to see the Shie Lucian, because I think Shie's Lucian might be the best Lucian, period.
It's
at least
good
in the mid lane. You have some pretty legacy Lucian 80 carry performances.
But we're not seeing him anywhere near that lane right now.
Right, but so Lucian's a mid laner, and I think he's got the market cornered on that. And I actually think that like there's a chance Jensen Contracts take it to Shie Condi in the 2v2, just because of there might be some problems with the Shie Jensen matchup in and of itself. And that's one thing Cloud9 was very reliant on in the play-ins. It's like they got a lot of advantages for free just because no wild card teams 2v2 is going to match Jensen and Contracts on any day ever. And one of the things I brought up in our failed broadcast, like, is that same thing going to work when you're against Faker Peanut? The answer was, in the first game, emphatically no. But then when they were in the game of Faker Blank, the answer was sorta. But you lost.
Yeah. So, well, as far as excuse me, as something else I want to talk about as far as like this matchup, but also a few others. We saw 3 of our 4 teams from the play-in stage are now in quarters, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
is there something to be said for having a head start on getting used to this meta and being able to play more games and kind of ramp up into this? Because I'll tell you, Cloud9 looked like they stretched before the games, and EDG looked 80 years old, like in that first game. And I think that while that was, Cloud9 deserved that win, I think there's something to be said for, them kind of getting a little warm up and familiarizing themselves with the meta. And as we know, even on the same patch, a Worlds meta will develop over time. Do you guys think this was do you guys think this is just coincidence, these teams showing up and playing well, or do you think that that's actually a factor for how the teams they actually upset and beat looked?
I think for Cloud9, they definitely got an advantage from the extra games. I can't say for sure for the other teams, but I think Cloud9 definitely showed that it helped them. Maybe Fnatic too. Maybe that's part of the reason that it helped them with endurance, and I don't know, that's kind of like the opposite. But I think Cloud9 for sure it helps them.
I think it does. I mean, you are testing the meta against wildcard teams, but so like Cloud9 maybe didn't get the best meta test against the likes of Team One, but you're gonna get something out of some warm up games. You're gonna get a preview of this, like the strategies that we have in our head can close games, and that's the most important thing. Is like the strategies we have can have a cohesive plan, execute it, and then close the game. And you get an idea, like maybe you're against a wildcard team, but you get an idea that at least that scenario is possible.
Also, anyone in chat or anyone watching this, the VOD on YouTube right now, the other teams having more time to practice is not the same. It's not the same environment as being on the stage. It's you could say that it has more preparatory value to it in certain aspects, but there's no way it's the same mentally. There's a big difference. So
Agreed.
I'm wondering if this was almost like a strange format advantage for some of these number 3 teams, especially the likes of WE, who arguably is like the cleanest of the 3 Chinese teams. But that was just something interesting that I thought. I want to do predictions for this series. We have a WE versus Cloud9. I will start it off saying that I think the WE will win this series. I think it'll be close, and I think Cloud9 will surprise. It'll go 3-2 WE. And Ezequiel, I'm coming to you next. Indy.
I'm feeling a 3-1 for WE. I definitely think WE, even though you said Cloud9 is the more consistent team, I think that when WE plays on, there's like nothing that Cloud9 can do, even if they wanted to, unfortunately, just the way that the bot lane's been playing specifically. I just think WE will play to their standards that we saw in groups, where they walked out 5-1 and pretty much uncontested first seed. I think that they'll take the first series 3-1.
El Capitan, you're up next.
I'm going to go for the 3-2. I was considering the 3-1, but I'll be greedy with my prediction. I've already had enough wrong ones. One more won't kill me. If I'm wrong, I've never been one to be scared of a wrong prediction. So I think Cloud9 has the stuff to make a 3-2 happen.
Okay. Are you saying 3-2 win Cloud9 or 3-2 lost?
3-2 loss.
Okay, okay. So World Elite is still going on to the semis.
I would think so.
Okay. Brian, who's got this?
I definitely think WE is going to win. Whether it's going to be 3-2 or 3-1, I think it's hard to say. I think 3-2 is probably more likely. I think Cloud9 can hold it out for a while. But one thing that I want to see happen, I think Cloud9 is one of the best teams to benefit from this. There's a new jungle route that's come out that Last Shadow has discovered, where if you give one of your small raptors to your mid laner, he hits level 2 off of the first wave. So he takes a small raptor and just clears the first wave, and he hits level 2 before the enemy mid laner. And your jungler also benefits from it because of catch-up XP. He does Raptors, Red, Blue, Gromp, and hits level 4. When normally that would not give you level 4 if you took all of the Raptors. It's a very complicated equation with how catch-up XP works, because you don't hit level 2 off of clearing all the raptors if you don't kill one of the little ones. And then you go to red and get level 2 off of that. And then it's like normally you would be left with 1% XP on the next level, but instead you get left with 97% XP at level 3. And then taking the last camp, no, level 2, and then the last camp gives you level 4. So it's like a really weird thing with how fucked up catch-up XP is. You can get like a cheese level 4 off of a strange clear. And I think Cloud9 is one of the better teams to benefit off that, with Contracts and Jensen being their biggest focal points in the early game.
So you're telling me that LS is literally like showing Western teams how to cut the Western shit now?
Yeah, like this came out like halfway through week 1 of Worlds, and it's like if teams are not picking this up, they are not trying to win. My opinion.
But you still think that WE wins the game?
I still think WE wins. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
Can't tell you how many times I've been playing with talking about how screwed up jungle experience can be. Can't tell you how many times I play a normal game with Brian and he pings just to tell me that. It says he should be 100% to his next level, but he's not.
Right. It's like I'm missing literally 3 XP.
He tilts so hard off it. It's so funny.
That's awful. Okay, so unanimously, WE moves on. The apple pie is gone in quarterfinals yet again.
Moment of silence.
Moment of silence for Nay. And let's move on to which this analysis should just be a moment of silence, because I just want to get SKT versus Misfits out of the way. Because if this isn't a 3-0, I will be very, very surprised.
SKT, I think, if you turn the nameplates off and you look at the way SKT played, you say, like, this team is going to have a very competitive series, but it's SKT. So I have faith in the way that SKT will prepare for the knockout stage, because this is a team that has been dominant, but it's also a team that has had hurdles to overcome before, and they've always jumped over those hurdles, and I don't think this time is any different.
Okay. I feel like the only way that Misfits would ever even remotely take a game would have to be like Maxlor exposing Peanut on like an off day or like an off-footing moment, and even then we saw Clearlove do that pretty consistently with like a 10k gold lead and like a 6k gold lead, and he couldn't do anything. So I just like I think you're right style-wise. You take the nameplates off, like maybe you like think a little bit, but that SKT factor has to come in, like where they're just like they're cockroaches in the late game. Like they just don't go down. So is this 3-0 from everybody? Anybody else have any? I don't know if there's much more to say about this matchup. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm on board. You can skip over me. That's.
Yeah. All right. Well, Misfits had a good run. No, dude. I mean, people were calling for their 06 in this group, and they're here.
I called for 06. I thought they were like
me too.
not good.
I think all 3 of us called for 06.
So like
garbage analysts.
Yeah, I guess so. All things considered, the fact that they're going to lose to one of the best teams in the tournament is not so bad. But yeah, that'll. I hope they still at least make a go. But I thought there's still some exciting gameplay. But I think it'll be pretty one-sided. I really am looking forward to RNG versus Fnatic, because I think that even if that is a one-sided series, it's going to be super fun. Like I just think both these teams are so explosive.
Agreed.
I think that every game gets decided pre-30 minutes.
You think so? You don't think any weird late game comeback?
Maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but these games are going to go very, very fast. There's going to be a lot of action. It's not going to be like one of those games where first blood happens 22 minutes in, like we've been seeing in some of the matchups. I think that it's going to be a lot of proactive plays on both ends, and regardless of outcome, even though I do think, I'll just say it now, I think RNG is going to win 3-0. Wow. I do think there's going to be a lot of moments that are like going to be used in next year's World's highlight videos or whatever. So
I want to see Uzi blind pick disrespect Vayne into reckless legacy Ken encounter. That's what I want. If that happens, I don't care what the result is.
I want to see the top laners on tanks so that I can see MLXG's Lee Sin versus Brox's Rek'Sai every single game.
MLXG hasn't played Lee Sin at all, though, has he? Like,
yeah, he did. He played it.
I think
he played it in the last game.
Okay, I just feel like I've seen him mostly like Rek'Sai and Sejuani, like in the summer, especially. Like he's been more of it's like gone are the days, or not anymore, obviously. But Lee Sin did get buffs in the Worlds patch, but he didn't really. He is a much different jungler from what he was last year. But I thought that he was super impressive compared to what people had him going in as. It's kind of like this like one-dimensional snowball mechanic. I think he really diversified his play. I think RNG as a whole really shored up a lot of their issues. And I also think they shouldn't have much of a problem winning this series. I think it's pretty one-sided, but I do think that Fnatic can take a game. I'm going to go RNG 3-1. Just because I think that Fnatic has the individual skill to, if they get like the breaks going their way for a game, I think they can close it out. Because I think RNG will just keep running into them. Like, even if they're down 10k, just because they're like, you're European, we're Chinese, whatever. Like, we'll figure it out. Like, seriously though, like, right? Like, I mean, that's like they do that from behind a lot. So
Right.
I think that Fnatic will just get a game off of that because they're talented enough to take a game lead within 20-25 minutes. And I think once you have that on RNG, like unless you're just garbage tier closing out late game, then you should be able to take a game off them.
I agree with the 3-1 prediction for RNG. Giving the one game to Fnatic purely based on the endurance that they showed and the experience with their veterans. Just I think that they can pull out one game. They can manage to win one game over RNG, but overall RNG is gonna mostly smash them. But they're gonna be bloody games regardless.
Yeah, should be fun. All right, I think we have one prediction left, right? GF1 captain.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Ezequiel's side. I'm gonna go with the 3-0. Maybe what I want to see some closure where if North America can't get more than one team out, at least Europe gets smashed. So maybe it's just what my heart desires.
Oh my god, NA Salt.
Till the end.
Well, I mean, I think that's a pretty. Like I said, I think like I said, 3-1's possible, but like I think 3-0 is more likely than 3-2, for example. Like I'm 3-1 leaning on the 3-0 side. I would say. I think RNG.
Yeah.
Even if Fnatic can match the early game firepower, RNG's shown more dimension as the game has gone on. Right, like as the game gets later, RNG isn't like necessarily a late game team traditionally, but they will have the superior macro play and superior team fighting. I think as the minutes continue to count upwards.
Agreed. One thing is like, I think the stylistic mismatch of the regions will be on display here because I think Europe has pretty good early game as an entire region, and then they have pretty good late game as an entire region. But mid game, like, what even is a mid game in Europe? Like it just seems so disjointed. Like, what is even happening? And China, like, is like, let's start the mid game. And the early game should be starting. Let's just do it. And I think that'll be a really fun stylistic mismatch to see, because you have a region that loves their mid game versus a region that like almost ignores it.
Though I will say my favorite style matches are our last quarterfinals, which is Longhzu versus Samsung. So you have this like just like gigantic battering ram, and then Samsung who just like want to play like chess, you know, like they there might not be a slower team left in the tournament, and there might not be a faster team than Longhzu in this tournament. So I think, regardless of even team levels, like this is just gonna be a fun,
unstoppable force versus immovable object.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you guys think of this series? What are your initial takes? Not just in terms of what do you expect to be like the strong points here? Because like I think we all can agree that Longhzu has the advantage, right? Like.
Yeah.
But I also think that if Samsung can hold on, like, the late game is their domain. And I feel like Longhzu is kind of doing this Samsung White thing, where, like, they're just smashing everybody early on, and they've had some decent... Like, their late game's fine. Don't get me wrong, but I do think, like, they're definitely stronger at the outset of the game, and I think that, like, the reason why it's interesting is because I think if Samsung can get them to that, like, 40-minute point, like, it can be anybody's game, given the comps and the state of the game at that point.
Given the way that they'll draft, I definitely think it will favor Samsung if it goes late. Just That's not to say like, oh, Longhzu players can't play late game, they can't close or anything, but they just don't draft for late game. Like it's
Right.
just not their style. And even with all the skill consideration in the world, like champions just have their innate limitations, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And it's a thing that I try to get people to understand on a daily basis. And that's just the teams are going to play towards their comfort in this series for sure. And it's going to be that early game versus late game mismatch. Can Longhzu create enough of a lead that the Samsung incredible late game doesn't matter? And in the regular season, the answer was typically yes. Things have become more indexed towards late game since then, but we do have some precedent to look at.
I think that the best thing about this matchup, and the thing that I think we need to look towards most, is the top lane. Western fans may know Samsung as the crown team. That has not been the case for some time. He had a after winning Spring MVP, I believe he did, he had a pretty down summer, definitely dropped off. And I think at Worlds he hasn't looked very sharp either, and it's mostly been about Ambition's macro and Cuvée really being the star of this team. And I thought it was interesting that ESPN had Cuvée ahead of Khan in their top lane power rankings. I think due to Khan's explosiveness and obviously being a better individual player, but Cuvée may being more proficient on the tank picks and being better at the TP flanks and more of the macro team-based perception of the top lane play. So I want to ask you guys, who's the better top laner and who's going to get the advantage for their team in this matchup? Which way do we see this going?
Did you say ESPN put Cuvée over Khan?
They did. I think
ESPN always does crazy stuff.
I think
Must
that
have missed that article.
I think Tyler put Khan over Fionn, but I think put Khan over Cuvée, but I think everybody else in the panel had Cuvée at number one because he was a more dimensional player. Whereas like yes, Khan's sword is sharper, but Cuvée has a much better shield. I think was the concept.
Yeah. Fionn always favored the swords. He likes the fighter playstyles like Flame and Khan.
Flame's his favorite player of all time, so yeah.
Right, yeah.
So
but about this matchup, I think Khan is better. I think, especially if he gets his Jace against the tanks that Cuvée wants to play, then it'll be in favor of Khan. But I don't expect them to just let Khan play his playstyle and like abuse Cuvée. So I still think Khan's better, but I think SSG will be better at playing against Khan's playstyle than teams we saw previously, like Immortals, Fnatic.
I like seeing Cuvé's Camille. That was a real treat in the group stage because I like that champion. I like watching that champion. My secret dream for this matchup is seeing the Camille from Cuvée versus the Jax from Khan.
Oh man, that would be fun.
That would be fun.
Oh.
Yeah, I really hope that they're like okay with putting Cuvée on some of his like pocket carries like that, and not just have him play like Maokai every game, because he has shown he does have that gear as well. I think that I'm really scared for the bottom side of the map for Samsung. Just on an individual level, BDD isn't the type of player to constantly smash you in, but he's far and away better than Crown right now in his current state, and Ruler has already had a bad Worlds, and Prey looks like he could actually be the best player in the world, like at this very moment. Like he has been completely insane. And I mean that. I think there's. I don't know if I can say that he's better than Faker right now, but I think like he's right up there. He's been incredible all year long, but especially this tournament, he's just shown that he can play the game on another level. And I just don't even know, like, can Samsung's bot lane like hold to that? Can they survive this laning phase 2v2?
Yeah, and that's what I really like about Longhzu, because picking a fighter top lane or a damage-oriented champion like Jace, stuff like that, that's like a backup carry plan. Like you just have him split push all game, and then maybe in the late game, if your AD carry isn't doing well enough, then you need the damage top laner to come in and win the game for you. But with Prey on the team, Khan can just split push all game. They don't need to use their plan B. They can just stick with their plan A with Prey. Plan Prey.
No, that's very very well put. That is kind of they have so many like oh, you took away my gun, I have another gun. Like, you know,
Right, yeah.
they just don't.
I'm immune to your bullets, so am I.
Exactly. So okay, then
I'm not actually left-handed.
this is going to be a really good stylistic matchup here. But who do we think's actually going to take it? Because this is where, you know, level of play comes in. Longhzu looks like the strongest team at this tournament. Samsung gets 2-0'd by RNG in groups and makes it out as a second seed. That's got to count for something. Indy, I'm coming to you first. Who's winning this this clash of styles here, and how convincing is it going to be?
I'm sticking to my early prediction, and I was not particularly impressed with Samsung throughout groups, even though they, you know, did, in my opinion, have the hardest group to like kind of show what they were capable of, as opposed to like Longhzu, who I think is just leaps ahead of the competition in their group. So it was kind of, you know, a little easier to see how dominant they were.
Right.
But I think that Longhzu wins 3-0. I think that Prey and Gorilla are the best bot lane of all time to ever do it. Like you were saying, I do think that I think Prey is number 1, number 2 AD carry, maybe tied with Uzi, at least at Worlds, not counting the entire split of the Korean LCS. But I'm putting all my Spirit Bomb energy into Longhzu to win Worlds. I think they're going to move past Samsung 3-0.
Okay, GF1 captain.
This is a tough one to predict. Like, because I'm definitely predicting Longhzu to win. But as far as the exact spread of the games, I feel like Samsung is good enough at their style that they can pull a game off Longhzu. Like, maybe Longhzu has some crazy draft that's like way too bad in the late game to even exist. I feel like that's a thing that could happen, and that Samsung could punish them for that. But I'm not sure whether like that'll happen once or twice. And I gotta pick one. Otherwise, I'm just a coward.
So 3-1 Longhzu?
I'll go 3-1.
Okay. All right, Brian.
I think 3-0 Longhzu. I think that they're just a better team, and that we didn't even see peak performance from Longhzu in the group stages. They didn't have to show all their cards playing against Immortals and Fnatic, and especially Gigabyte Marines. So I think there's still new things that we can see from Longhzu, and just based on that, like, well, I mean, that in addition to their already dominant team, that I think Longhzu just 3-0s.
I'm going to piggyback on your point about how Longhzu didn't have to play all their cards, because everybody was freaking out about Archie's, Gigabyte Marine, their top laner's Mordekaiser. Con played Mordekaiser top this summer in LCK. Like Longhzu hasn't shown anything. Yeah. Okay, like they can play whatever they want. Like, we might just see Brown Ashe just because. You know what I mean? Because he can just play that champion in any meta. Because that's who he is. So it's like, I think what's really interesting here is that I honestly
think Ashe will come out as Ashe has historically been kind of an answer to the Caitlyn. The range disparity
very true.
Is not as large when it's Ashe versus Caitlyn, and the wave clear can match. So I think Ashe could return as a Caitlyn answer. It's not a Caitlyn counter, but it is a Caitlyn answer.
And Ruler loves to play Caitlyn, so that that increases the likelihood, I would say. And I can totally see Samsung. Because what I was going to say is I see Samsung attempting to contain Khan by... I think Ambition's a better player than Cuz. I don't think he can smash him in or anything, but I think that Ambition can cater to his top laner at a higher level than Cuz might be able to if Ambition just tunnels on top lane.
Right.
But I also think that opens up the bot lane to just get smashed 2v2, and I think that's why they may favor the Caitlyn, which may lead to the Prey Ashe. Like, just because I think Ruler's going to want to pick Caitlyn or something that's like lane safe, so the Samsung can get to the late game, and they're like, hey, we're going to ditch the hyper carry pick here to survive, and then just hope that our better late game macro is what's going to make the difference. You know, I think that's what they have to do. They have to find a way to mitigate their side lanes in a way that they don't lose both of them extremely hard. I don't think Cuvée will lose extremely hard, but I think they'll be looking to get him ahead because he's their only win condition, whereas Longhzu has many, and that doesn't even include BDD, who they don't even play through, who's one of the best mid laners in the world. So it's like,
right.
like he's not even a win condition on this team, and he's like better than Bjergsen. So, like, it's completely insane. I think that they 3-0. I think that the individual level is going to matter too much, and I think that Samsung is forced to tunnel on the late game, where Longhzu can kind of do whatever they want. I think there's just too many options for Longhzu to play around, and that Samsung isn't going to be able to plug all the holes from their sinking ship.
I think that one thing that has impressed me immensely with Longhzu is like the way that they can create an advantage for both side lanes, because that's one of the hardest things to do in competitive League of Legends, by even visiting, like not even ganking, visiting like one side of the map. Like you're inherently giving up the pressure on the other one.
That's a lot of coverage, yeah.
But I've seen some VOD reviews for them where it's like they have advantages in like the top and bot lane at the same time. Like that's how they beat SKT. And that's something that's incredible, because if that happens, that's almost impossible to come back, because you have the inside track every objective if you have a top lane and bot lane like covered. Every dragon's yours, every baron's yours, every red buff, every blue buff is yours, everything is yours if that happens.
Right. I think the big thing with that is if you're capable of getting top turret without putting your bot lane in top lane to kill it, then you're pretty set up to just win the game. And that's something that we've seen Khan do. So
what I want to talk about now is we're going to wrap the show pretty quick here, but I want to bring two more topics in. The first one being, what type of meta changes? We've already talked about the Ashe a little bit. What do you guys expect to see come out as far as whether it be banned champions, no longer being banned, or higher priority in other picks? Like any spicy meta predictions from my fantastic analysts?
Yeah, I already mentioned the Ashe. I think will come out as a Caitlyn answer. A lot of it, I think, depends on like the team you're facing. Like Chinese teams, you know, they love their Galio J4, and then I think we'll get to see better Ryze performances, because I think Ryze is better in this meta than perhaps some of the performance in group stage suggested. I really do believe that.
Right, we talked earlier about how it's more of like the team's not ready to capitalize on him fully just because they haven't had enough time with the pick, right?
Yeah, and we have Faker, the best Ryze in the world, in this group. So I'm holding out hopes to see more Ryze. I want to see an Aurelion Soul game, just because that's a fun champion to watch always.
I think something that's really exciting about that is that both Fnatic and RNG have shown that their mid laners can play Aurelion Sol whenever they want. Maybe not to that Hu-He level, but Xiaohu and Caps have both pulled it out in completely different metas. So I wonder if that's going to rise in priority just because of the uniqueness of the pick.
And that's something that I think adds, like, what you're saying is that you want to see Ryze. Get out of my chat, sir, for that pun. But yeah, I am seeing that. And Aurelion Sol, I think, adds a lot of proactivity to the early game, and it's something that I think that when you're super skilled on it, I think there's not a lot of good answers to it. I don't think there's a lot of good Sol counters, and if there are, like, they're hidden, because like we just haven't seen this pick enough yet to like know what truly counters it. The stats are like so slim for this champion. It's like, what are the true Aurelion Sol counters? I don't actually know what the true counters to this champion are.
There's not a lot of sample size.
Right. And I don't think the world knows yet. And so I want to see teams take advantage of that. And then we'll also get the information. We might get to see like what does counter Sol. Like completely, what shuts him down.
I think Talia is a good answer, as you call it. Like she's not a counter, but an answer at least.
Strong wave clear, matching the roaming potential too with the ultimate. It's been one of the more common picks. It's either been that or it's been, I've seen a lot of people, what they'll do is they will take Syndra or even an Orianna in Faker's case, and not even try to kill him, but just every time your ult is up, you all in him, and you get him down below 1/3 HP. So it's like, I can't kill you, but I'll keep you pushed in, and I'm not going to let you roam because I'm going to scale into a better champion than you. Like if I don't let you get ahead.
Another good thing about Asol, you hit level 2 off of the first wave if you do that Raptor start. So you just start Q and then take E level 2 and you roam off the first wave down to bot lane.
God.
And there's gonna be there could be some insane snowballing off of that.
I want to see that.
I'm hoping for the Asol pick now too.
And I also like the idea of Sol in this meta, because it can just head straight to the bot lane and like get advantages. It like adds some proactivity to your AD carry, and it also is an underrated pick, I think, when it comes to protecting your AD carry.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, sorry, continue. But
because when it comes to like Aurelion Sol is kind of the last in the line of the Rylai's mid laners, and with those stars floating around, it's like anyone who comes into that range is going to be like slowed, and then they could get stunned by the star surge. They could just get knocked away by the voice of light, and it's a pick that I think has a pretty remarkable amount of appeal for a mid laner, and in a pretty AD carry centric meta, I think that's valuable.
Yeah, I mean, he creates zones, right? And his ultimate, like, it's a solid disengage. You know, like, I could definitely see, like, teams taking advantage. Like, I could see Uzion, Kog'Maw, and Xiaohu on Aurelion Sol and them just, like, winning a game, like, sub 20 minutes, if done properly, honestly. Like, I think that there's, like, huge potential for this pick to actually make a big difference. I'm going to be excited to see if it comes out. Are there any other meta predictions before we move on to our final section here?
I think 957 will pick Kled at least one game.
I hope it does.
Oh, I hope so.
I love seeing Kled played. He's one of my favorite champions.
And I think he does pretty well against like Cho'Gath and namely like more of the tankier top laners like Cho'Gath J4. And it's the ultimate allows you to make a lot of roaming plays from the top lane to like the mid lane or rotate around objectives. So who knows? It might be a niche pick. I hope I see it just because 957's Kled Msi was top notch to see.
Yeah, it's one of his best picks. Do you, Brian? Do you think that that there's a likelihood in that, like that it would be that Kled could come around as a pick, or do you think it'll just be kind of a specialist pocket pick, kind of like the Fizz has been for a few guys here?
I think it's more of a pocket pick, just because of I think a lot of players actually don't like playing Kled, just because he's like so weird. He has kind of an obscure play style to him, so people don't like to play him. Is the only thing that I can figure because. Be good, and he's great for a team-oriented playstyle. So people just must not like his obscure playstyle. Like most mid laners don't like playing Asol. So I think it will be more of a pocket pick, even though I think it deserves a place as a viable meta pick.
I like Kled because he's kind of in that wheelhouse with J4 and Renekton of like, he gives you a little bit of both, that split pusher and the tank. Like Kled with his passive and like a Guardian Angel and like a Spirit Visage, this guy can tank so much damage.
Janna on his team?
Yeah. In the late game. It's actually insane.
He's just tanky, yeah.
And he's got good engage. He's got good like crowd control to like set up those engages. The one thing I think he lacks compared to like a hard tank is he's not as good at peeling. But you know, you're gonna have Jannas and Redemptions and Rockets. Take care of that.
He makes fantastic team comps with Asol.
Yes, agreed.
That would be an exciting RNG comp, like Kog'Maw, Asol, Kled. Make it happen, please, guys. Make it happen.
We've already seen some of this, but like only from Fnatic. Sivir. Sivir's a champion who I don't understand. Like, it was rising and then it just dropped. And we saw Fnatic pick it. We know it's a comfort pick for Reckless.
I mean,
but
it's...
Sivir,
Go ahead.
Sivir's a champion that I think, like, gives coaches a real chance to show their intelligence with the draft because there's just so many interesting synergies with Sivir. Like, Sivir with immobile tanks like Taric and Cho'Gath, and giving them like this potential to like engage in situations where they otherwise wouldn't be able to do so, I think is just really interesting. And I like seeing Sivir at the competitive level for that reason. Even though a lot of people tend to think it's this like resident sleeper pick, I 1,000% agree.
I think
Sivir
really
also
fun.
goes really well with Asol and Kled.
That's very
Yes.
true. I think Sivir's gets kind of a bad rap from people who've never liked her. Well, like she's a very strong 6-item carry now, but I do think that the problem, I mean, just like the range, right? Like, I mean, against a Tristana or Kog'Maw, are you going to do anything? I don't think so. Like, I don't think you're ever going to get into a place to be formidable, and when you do have Cho'Gath who can flash aura into your face for your full health bar, like, you can't afford to be that close all the time.
That's true.
I would like to see more Trundle. I think Trundle's intelligent right now, and I want to see it utilized more by guys like I think some carry top laners can really take advantage of it as more of a smart bruiser carry pick. Like, whereas if Jace is like the unstoppable force, like Trundle's like the smart split push pick. I would really like to see more of him.
What I like
played it pretty well.
What I like about Trundle is that how he's another one of those champions who could be deceptively tanky, because he basically steals your grill and then he steals your stats. So he takes all your tank stats and then he becomes a tank. Even when he's walking around with like a ravenous Hydra, like he gets to be a tank, and that's silly.
Agreed.
And the one thing I think you lose with Trundle is Trundle's CC is basically non-existent. I mean, he does have the pillar, and you can create some kind of interesting flank opportunities with that, and it's a cool ability, and I like it. But it's not a Maokai W. It's not a Shen taunt. It's not a J4 EQ. It's not a Sejuani ult. It's not a Gragas ult. It's a Trundle pillar.
It's not quite as like reliable and like just like to the point as far as RTC goes, right? Like,
right.
All right. Well, if anybody else seeing any other pocket picks, or can we move on?
Good here.
I can't imagine that there are going to be any other, like, I think we went over like any of the weird high impact stuff that can happen. I think that
I think there's going to be something crazy that we can't possibly predict.
It has to be like really obscure.
What about more Sona? We saw Fnatic
Sona. I like Sona in I've talked about this frequently. My favorite situation for Sona. Okay, first of all, Janna has to be banned because Janna does this better.
Right.
But Sona is good at multi-marksman comps. So, like, say you have a Lucian mid, a Corki mid, an Ezreal jungle, a Jace top, because she can consistently apply that AoE Ardent Sensor with her W with just an extremely low cooldown where it's always on everybody. And I think, like, picking the kinds of champions that can abuse that in those multi-marksman comps, I think sets you up for, like, crazy objective takes, crazy siege potential. And that's what I like about Sona. And also a little bit of proactivity in lane with the ult and with her poke as well. Big reason why teams shy away from Sona is Sona is the worst champion in any situation where she bot lane gets ganked.
Yeah. Pretty much. She's like the squishiest champion in the game with no like disengage outside of ultimate, right? Like,
right.
I want to see if Fnatic goes down to O2. I want to see them run that comp that you just said. Tristana Sona bot lane with Corki, Ezreal, Jace topside. Destroy all of the towers. Like, no, but really though, Brian, do you think this Sona pick could be something that we see more often? Teams are starting to ban Lulu and Janna more than they were in the first week, and I'm wondering what the support pool is going to look like after that, if that continues.
I'm a little insulted that you guys talked down on the Nami, but then said Sona could be picked. Like, what is happening here? Nami and Janna are basically the same champion, so it's just the difference between shields and heals, and their basic abilities at least, and then a disengage ulti. So I think Nami has higher potential than Sona if teams start finally banning Janna, which I can't really say whether or not I think that'll happen in group stages because it feels like a really strong pick that you should ban away, but at the same time, it feels like a wasted ban because it's a support that's just building Ardent Sensor. So it's like hard to say whether teams really feel that that's a threat, but it's something that I personally would ban away as a jungler.
I'll clarify, as a jungler, of course you ban. I will clarify what I think is wrong with Nami is her main means of getting the Ardent Sensor on is such a higher cooldown that I think you're going to lose out on some
that is true
time with the sensor on your carry in team fights. And I think that can really make a difference in the early game where Nami is looking to be the most proactive. I think it'll probably shore itself up in the late game with when obviously every support's got 40% CDR and it doesn't matter. But
I found a fix for that.
What is that?
Nami takes Stoneborn, puts her E on the AD carry. The AD carry gets his own Ardent Sensor proc from the E slow. Because I'm pretty sure that would work.
I think that does work the way that you're formulating it, actually.
So if you just balance your cooldowns with your W and your E's to get the constant Ardent procs, it could work.
What about if we're talking in the realm of Lulu and Janna being banned, and let this be our last little meta point here. We saw unsuccessfully TSM playing Karma, but Karma's been a pretty meta pick for the majority of the last, I'd say 2 years. I think that after Lulu and Janna, she might be the next in line, and we also have some teams who are very comfortable with flexing Karma. If you include Huni's solo queue before Worlds, SKT can triple flex it. GA has played a ton of Karma for WE. Do we expect to see Karma as kind of the go-to priority Ardent Sensor pick due to its flexibility if Lulu and Janna are banned?
Karma goes very well with Kled, Asol, and Sivir.
He's going to keep mentioning things that go well with...
That is my favorite team comp.
Regretting mentioning there's the Asol and the Sivir just because of...
No way, I don't regret anything. That comp sounds amazing. Put a Hecarim in the jungle, I don't care.
I think Karma has fallen off because of all the losses to how strong lane pressure, the advantages you can get off of pressuring the bot lane through poke are way worse than they were earlier in the year.
That's fair.
With all the and Karma's shield saw a bunch of nerfs, and again the high cooldown is something to consider. She can put it on your whole team. She doesn't have a big Stoneborn loophole that I can see in the kit. Maybe I need to review, but personally, I think even if that does happen, I think Karma without Thunderlords, it loses a lot of point because it's you're not really using the pick at what it's for, which is that heavy pressure in the bot lane.
Right. That's a good point. All right then. Well, in that instance, then I want to bring it to one more question, and we're going to be doing more of these shows as each round of playoffs concludes. So I want to do this at the end of every episode and see how we're feeling and kind of compare them. Right now, based on how things stand, and I'm going to start with Brian here. Who's your world's favorite right now?
To win the whole thing?
Yes.
Longhzu.
Okay.
Definitely, I think.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Just spit it out and we'll talk about it after.
Longhzu. I agree with Brian. They've been, like I said earlier, I've been on the Longhzu hype train since the world started, so.
Yeah. Longhzu. I'll agree. We'll go three for three.
Nick's gonna say Cloud9.
We saw teams, kind of, even if they overcome SKT in the regular season, fall to them in the finals. I believe it was the coach of the Coup Tigers in 2015, who famously said, "At least we will be remembered as the most beautiful second place team of all time."
I love that team so much. Everything about them. Okay, well, last time you guys agreed on something, TSM didn't get a groups. So
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So
We cursed Longhzu.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm going with SKT here. And I think that as the Worlds Meta develops, I think that SKT has shown they get stronger as tournaments go on, and that they haven't had problems stopping like the more unstoppable looking team. That being said, I'd say teams past both Tigers teams they stopped in the past did not look as strong as Longhzu did this year in groups, and I think that this will be their toughest test. I think SKT is at their lowest power level in 3 years by a good margin, and I think that Longhzu is the closest they've ever been to. This is the best team that they've ever faced, I think. I think that their players. I think that while there's maybe been like better rosters assembled on paper, I think Tigers last year and then KT this year, but both those teams have some choking issues or some underperforming issues on an international stage. Longhzu have shown they kind of don't. I mean, yes, their team level wasn't quite what we've grown to expect from them at groups, but I don't think they're gonna hold anything back in these best of 5 series. But
and I think Gorilla's gonna pull some crazy support pick that we couldn't have possibly predicted the way he did last year with Misfortune Sport. Like, who thinks of that?
That's my favorite pocket pick of all time because literally no one saw it coming. They released the comms of that, and Faker's like telling his teammates, "No, it's Misfortune 80 carry. Calm down. It's Ash support." And then Gorilla's like, "Nah, son." Like, that oh god, that I could just write a romance novel on Misfortune support, but but no, I'm gonna go with SKT here. I think that they haven't. I don't have a good reason. Honestly, if we're talking about on-paper analysis, I don't think that. I think that Huni won't get smashed in by Khan. I really don't think he will. I do fear if Cuz beats Peanut or Blank to the punch, since Blank tends to be one of the more slower like control junglers, and Peanut just tends to like be anemic sometimes. I think that can be a problem. But
they've neutered him.
I don't know. I have a problem betting against Faker and Coma at this point. And I don't think. I think that what it's really going to come down to, honestly, is it's going to be the bot lane matchup. I think if Bang and Wolf can lane to their normal standards, they'll be fine. But I think if Bang and Wolf play like they did in some of these group stage games, I think it'll just be decided off of that alone. I think Prey and Gorilla are too hungry to play anything but the best series of their lives. And so maybe this pick is a little bit more like guts and like mentality and pedigree. But I think that SKT will still win, and I think that they will be a 4-time world champion. And now I want you guys to tell me why I'm completely wrong. Seriously, no, I mean, because you guys.
I don't think you are completely wrong because, like I said, I don't have. I have more faith in SKT to like shore up the weaknesses that they've shown than I do for any other team because they've done it before so consistently. It's like SKT is a team that can identify a clear problem and find a clear solution. They do it every time. But is that enough to take on Longhzu? That's my only question. And I think that's a real question. It's not like, oh, Longhzu's clearly going to smash SKT, or SKT is just going to get their anime plot armor on and just like come back in the end just like they always do. But like, this is the real world. It's not scripted despite all the memes. There's gonna be a real challenge here. The finals we all predicted would be SKT Longhzu. I don't see it being anything but games.
Anything but 5 games, though, you said?
Anything but 5 games.
Yeah, I think it's going to go 5, and I think if those two teams, I think that's the most clear path. I think both these teams are on other sides of the bracket, and I think that would probably be the best World Finals ever. I think SKT Samsung was fun, but I think that like this would just be a higher level of play, and I think it would be, I don't know. Nothing, not taking anything away from Samsung. I was there live, and that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. But. I think that'd be a really exciting final, and I wanted to ask that question initially to kind of see where we stand, and then looking towards how maybe Longhzu is a shaky series against Samsung, we're feeling less confident. That way we can kind of go back and revisit like our tournament favorites here. So But with that, that's going to conclude this episode. For those of you watching, thank you so much for watching our first episode of Gap Closer, especially if you were around for our little test episode that Matt so fondly referred to as the failed episode.
Wait,
as you can
I
see.
have my controversial opinion.
Oh, wait, what? I'm sorry. Did I cut you off? Go for it.
SKT loses to Royal in semifinals.
Oh, my God.
Oh.
I don't think that we'll be seeing SKT in the finals of Worlds this year.
Okay, fine.
Oh.
We definitely have to go into this then. Okay, you gotta explain.
This episode is not over now.
Never mind.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut it off.
No, I'm glad you did. No, let's unpack that for at least.
Because I don't think it's a crazy prediction. It's kind of a crazy prediction, but it's not like you've made the craziest prediction of all time. I'm checking you into the insane asylum because I think it could happen.
I mean, I could. Yeah.
I mean, anything could happen. Like, Cloud9 could beat Longhzu in the semifinals, and then just, like, and then, like, the other teams could just be so stunned and surprised that, like, they just, like, take it home for NA, and they just be like, take that, TSM, we did it.
Is that the Cloud9 fan fiction?
No. I'm
into it. No,
I'll review it for you. I'll review it for you.
Right on. No, Ezequiel, Indy, you got to explain this a little
Anything
bit more.
could happen, but I don't think it's an entirely correct prediction.
All right.
I want to hear more because I get obviously this is going to be about the early game, but still I want to hear what you have to say.
So yeah. So going back to your point about Prey and Gorilla just being the hungriest bot lane competitors, and that's like gonna drive them through, their side of bracket to finals, and then against SKT, they're going to be playing the best league of their lives.
I just don't see them underperforming win or loss, ever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Uzi has been second place king for far too long, and I don't think, to me, he looks like the most valuable person on any given team at the current moment, at least on the world stage.
Okay.
I think that the way that he not only like funnels resources without taking away from his team, but what he does with those, I put him best AD carry at Worlds, even above Prey. Okay. Even though I think Prey is phenomenal, and I think Prey is the gold standard of what you should be trying to build your bot lane around. I think that at this specific tournament, Uzi is the most valuable player that's there currently. And I think with Ming, very underrated because it's always about Uzi and Xiaohu. I think that Ming, for being as new as he is to competitive, let alone the world stage, the fact that he was able to pick it up so naturally and make these crazy shot calls and kind of keep everyone in line, it just boggles my mind that he's able to have it together so young.
That's a big factor too. Like, people are saying that RNG is a better macro than previous years. This 17-year-old support kid's the shot caller, everyone. Just for the record, like he's very, very underrated. I completely agree with you. I don't know if that's going to be enough. We saw EDG get an astronomical gold lead against SKT, and like, I just don't know if there's an early game that isn't Longhzu's that can actually truly best them at this tournament.
That's the thing, though, is like when I was watching that game, when I was watching EDG versus SKT, for some reason I just like didn't feel like 8 kills and 9K was enough to close out a game.
And that's why,
and that's why I was mentioning earlier from like the very beginning of the show. If you put either WE or RNG in that position with that big of a gold lead, I think that they close out the game 99% of the time. I think that they have the capability that EDG didn't have, and I'm very that's probably going to be my favorite series to watch, even more so than the finals and Worlds, to be completely honest, because I don't know, something tells me it's like a mix of gut feeling and then like pure analytic stats of Uzi being the MVP of Worlds, at least up to this point. I think that they have what it takes to just kind of press their advantage early and then never let it go the way that EDG did.
I can see that.
I will say about Ming, it is impressive, like especially hearing that he's the shot caller, because if especially because if someone told me, if I was like a solo queue support and someone told me it's like, okay, now you're going to support for Uzi on the competitive stage and you're going to be a shot caller, I would pee myself.
Yeah.
That's probably the reaction that like 90% of the planet would have at least.
I was like, I would be honored that they would be the one to pick me, but I would be so terrified.
Yeah, no, that's big shoes to fill for sure.
Well, like everything I do, I didn't lane. I would just like ask him. I would feel like the need to ask him permission. Like I would be like, I'm gonna leave the 2v2 for a second toward the bush. Is that okay?
I mean,
is that okay, Uzi Senpai?
That's why it's worked for them, though, right? Is that Ming isn't afraid to leave him by himself, and he's like, "No, we're playing around Xiao. That's how they play the game." Like MLX chooses bot a lot, but Ming is roaming a fair amount of the time. So, Brian, I want to ask you, because you said that you could see this happening. Break it down for me, especially jungle to jungle. Like how does RNG beat SKT in this hypothetical semifinal that we're likely going to see?
Jungle to jungle, I think the increased focus on bot lane for RNG that they're still showing at Worlds will help a lot. The who's their top laner? I'm drawing a blank.
Let me.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about Let Me. I think Huni's better, and I think if RNG focuses on their bot lane and gains the early advantages, like Zeke was saying, that they can keep the early leads, unlike EDG couldn't. That's a complicated sentence, but I think that if they get early leads, then they can keep them against SKT and will end up getting wins. I don't think that they'll win the series off of that, but I think that's definitely the way that they'll take games, and I could see an upset through that strategy.
All right, well, we're definitely gonna have to see how that semifinal shakes down. Hopefully, we'll be discussing that a whole bunch in depth next week. I think that's going to be really exciting because I do think there's some validity to that. While most people would probably crucify you for that statement, but I think that it's important to consider these things. That'll definitely be something that we watch for. But I think we're going to call this episode now. Thank you guys for watching this full 2+ hours. Whether you're watching on Twitch or YouTube, if you like the content you're seeing, please subscribe. These three guys are all on our Caliber website, Caliber Esports, caliber.gg. They put out great content, so please feel free to check them out and their individual influence on League of Legends Esports, and for you, Indy, also smash. But that's gonna do it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.
Hasta la pasta.